message concerning the world's interaction with both Earth-based and off-world astronauts.
Nell'episodio precedente abbiamo visto la testimonianza dello scienziato di Stanford Gary Nolan, che ha dichiarato: le intelligenze non umane sono presenti su questo pianeta da molto tempo. Ha raccontato che ha analizzato alcuni metalli esotici di velivoli che si sono schiantati. Ha anche spiegato che i velivoli caduti sono droni oppure sono pilotati da intelligenze artificiali che ha chiamato intermediari, probabilmente intelligenze artificiali biologiche. Ha anche speculato circa la questione che le intelligenze non umane potrebbero essere anche 1 milione di anni più avanzati rispetto a noi. In questa puntata, invece, vediamo alcune testimonianze pubblicate pochissimi giorni fa, ma registrate a fine degli anni 90, tenute in archivio fino a poco tempo fa, evidentemente, e passate totalmente in sordina, che corroborano in parte le dichiarazioni di Grush riguardo all'accordo tra il presidente Eisenhower e le intelligenze non umane. In pratica riteniamo, e questa è una nostra speculazione, che questa fosse la disclosure di 30 anni fa, che per qualche motivo non è mai iniziata ufficialmente. Hanno iniziato a registrare qualche testimonianza, in qualche modo simile a quelle di oggi. Sono infatti tutti militari in pensione, ma c'è anche un politico in pensione. E le testimonianze si riferiscono ad un incontro ufficiale tra il presidente Eisenhower e le intelligenze non umane, ma successivamente qualcuno deve aver bloccato il processo. Come detto precedentemente, se volete capire come siamo arrivati a questo punto, abbiamo cercato di raccontare sia il processo che le persone coinvolte negli episodi precedenti. I primi 6 sono in assoluto i più importanti. Recentemente abbiamo anche notato un forte incremento nelle news in America riguardo agli UFO. Stiamo quindi rivedendo un minimo la nostra scaletta alla luce delle nuove rivelazioni e dei nuovi materiali.
While I was there, Eisenhower was going to land one day, and in the winter, February, Holloman Air Force Base has got a code that unless in the wintertime everything is normally khakis. Unless you're doing base operations work and are an officer of an official standing on the base, then you wear blues. That's in the wintertime. So the story that I'm telling you, the difference between khakis and blues is very important. When Dorsey came in about 15 minutes later, he said, "Kirkland, did you see what's out at on the flight line?" I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's a disc, hovering disc." I'm thinking disc that you can throw, 12 inches maybe. The only thing that I knew that hovered other than that was a helicopter and the Navy's hovercraft. And I'm saying, "Oh," I said, "what's it made of?" He says, "Metal, like polished aluminum, polished steel." He said, "Metal." I said, "How big is it?" He said, 20 to 30 feet. I said, "No, I haven't seen it." He said, "You want to see it?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I'd like to see it." He said, "Go out to the front of the hospital," he says, "and look down at the flight line." He said, "You'll see it." I said, "With my luck," I said, "I would go out there and it wouldn't be there." He said, "I wouldn't say that." He says, "I took my wife to the commissary and it was there 30 minutes later when I left." And I said, "Well, I'll ask." In a base where there's war conditions, regardless of where you're on 24/7. And if you leave your assigned spot, that's against the law, military law. So I asked the nurse who had asked the doctor if I could go out to the front and see it. She looked at the doctor, and the doctor said no, so I didn't go. 9 o'clock, go for coffee. Coming back from coffee, I'm following 2 young pilots. The one on the left is in khakis, the one on the right is in blues. The one on the left said, "Why the blues?" He says, "I'm the officer of the day." He says, "I've been down at base ops all day." He said, waiting for the plane come in? He said, Air Force One? He said, yes. That was the first time I heard Air Force One. I didn't know what it meant. I had to ask that too. Well, in the 60s, that was very common, but in the 40s, it was the first time I heard it. He says, well, what happened? He said, he landed, he turned around on the active and shut down. And we were told to turn off our radar. Why were you told to turn off your radar? I don't know. He said, we were told to turn it off, so we turned them off. What happened after that? He said, they came out over the mountains, across the proving ground, White Sands Proving Ground, across the monument, and the guy on the left, again, the khaki guy said, I heard one landed at the monument. He said, the other one said, I don't know about that. I'm telling you what I saw. He says, two of them came over. One landed on the active in front of the plane, and the other one hovered overhead like it was protecting that plane. He got out of his plane, walked to the UFO, and the door opened, and he walked inside. How long was he in there? About 40 or 45 minutes. Could you see? Were they grays? He says, I couldn't see. I didn't have binoculars. Who had the binoculars? The tower. Could they see? No, they didn't have the angle. This is all going on while I'm walking behind them, probably no more from here to the lobby area. And as they were doing this, one of them said, did you see, the one on the left again, did you see the autopsy film? And the one on the right said, yes. Do you think it's real? I don't know. So it was available in 55. He said, but I'm telling you is what I saw. Standing room only, in the supply hangar, 225 people each time it was there. And I said, who talked? He said, the commander-in-chief. I said, the president. He said, the commander-in-chief. You don't ask a lieutenant colonel again if it was the president. So I knew that. I said, what did he talk about? He says, it's classified. I said, how is it classified? Confidential? He says, higher. I said, secret. He said, higher. I said, O. He says, what's the O? I said, I'm only classified to secret. It's none of my business. And he says, I would not say that if I were you. That was in 1955. I didn't believe in these things for 40 years. 1995, I was listening to a man by the name of Mike Murphy in Kansas City. And Mike Murphy was interviewing a guy by the name of Bob Dean. Bob Dean said that he had talked to a man who was a crew member aboard Air Force One that landed at Holloman. At Holloman, Eisenhower got out and went aboard a UFO. I said, my God, I was there. I became a believer. But when I was graduated from Long Beach, I worked at North American, and I worked at Burbank and Lockheed. I worked on the Blackbird. And then from there, I went to Motorola and worked as a scientific computer specialist for an analog group. Ed Groth by name. This is kind of interesting too. Ed said that the electronic people had told him that they had made a 120 to 150 year jump. I said, how? And he said, by backward engineering a foreign object. I said, Russian? He said he didn't know where it came from, but it was backward engineered. About a week later, an electrical engineer told me that what they were backward engineering was a computer. And this computer carried 30 digits of accuracy. Where do you need 30 digits of accuracy? From there, I went back to Collins Radio. And from Collins Radio, I went to Houston working for Lockheed's Missile and Space. The astronauts, and this is hearsay because I was not there, but I was told by somebody that did. The astronauts were told that they should not talk about any kitchen items flying, like pancakes, dishes, or cups. Saucers were not mentioned. Do you understand what I mean? He said. You're not to talk about this among yourselves, your wives, your family, or anyone by radio or on the radio. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wally Schirra is up in space, circling the Earth, and he says, Houston, there is a Santa Claus. The boys who went around the moon came back out from the far side, and another astronaut said, there is a Santa Claus, and he's big. Now, how big he was, I never figured out until I heard at Laughlin this year that 2 Navy men had seen a craft come out of the water about a mile and a half away from them that was 3 to 5 times the size of an aircraft carrier. Okay? Now, the verification of my story at Holloman was done by Art Campbell, and Art has recorded information of a woman whose father became a fireman. So, if you want, Art?
We will put on the electrician's daughter, please. This lady contacted me as a result of an article in the UFO magazine.
Okay, that's Auburn, Nebraska, October 26, 1989. Dear kids, it's beautiful fall here with the usual pumpkins up and down the main drag. Kids are getting excited. Your father and I are doing well. Heard from Helen, she said the grandchild came on time, and Dad has just come from the kitchen with a cup of coffee, and he says he doesn't mind telling the fireman story again, but you kids know it better after all these years. But he'll recall what he can. All right, this is the part. Well, you kids and Mom moved down from Albuquerque, I think it was in the summer of 1954. As you recall, I had taken the Holloman job that previous winter, and Mom wanted us all together, so we rented a place over near Dudley Elementary School on Maryland, wasn't it? Remember, you kids could walk to school. You were in the 4th grade, and Billy was in 1st or 2nd. Anyhow, sometime after Christmas of '55, we were told President Eisenhower was coming. So George, our boss then at the electric shop, went to a meeting to find out more. He would not be inspecting anything, and they said just carry on as usual. If you see the president, don't gawk, wave, or anything, just carry on. So the day the president came, we went out in the truck to a job where we were replacing some wire down the flight line. It was really old stuff, but that put there in World War II, and safe. So we heard the president's plane in the morning, lining up for an approach, and watched it land on the far runway. So we waited for it to taxi over to the flight line so we could see him. But we didn't hear it anymore, and it had shut down somewhere out there. So we went ahead and pulled wire for a while, and one of the men, I believe it was Charlie, said he can see out there from that pole over there. So why don't one of us go up the pole and see where the plane is? Well, I had my climbers on, and I started to unbuckle them and was waiting to give them to the first volunteer, when someone said I should do it as people were used to seeing me up on the poles anyway. So I started up with my back to the sun, a safety measure, which also put my back to the runway where we thought his Connie was. Connie was a nickname for the big constellation the president flew. As I started up, some of the guys reminded me not to gawk, and I heard them laugh. A few minutes later, I heard some shouting, and some guys tarring a hangar roof nearby started to run, pointing out to the runways. Then I heard our truck start up, and some of the crew jumped in with 1 or 2 running after it. And they were pointing out to the flight line, and so I decided to turn around on the pole to see what the ruckus was about, and I could not believe what I saw. There was this pie tin-like thing coming at me about 150 feet away. I thought it was remote controlled or something. 25 to 30 feet across, and I started down the pole as fast as I could go. I was up about 40 feet, and I threw my climbing rope out, gave it slack, and only touched the spike on each side of the pole 3 or 4 times on each side in before I got to the bottom. While I was running towards the big hangar, I looked back, and it had stopped and was just sitting there. Well, when we all got back to the shop and we had a good lap, one of the guys who saw me come down said, He got down that pole faster than a fireman. So as you kids were growing up and we had the family gatherings, you used to ask to tell me about the time I became a fireman. It was an unwritten rule at Holloman. You didn't talk about what you saw, and after that day, it was seldom mentioned at the shop. All of our love, Mom and Dad.
His first,
There's some things that came afterwards that we're aware of that may or may not be connected. It's our understanding, at least mine, that the extraterrestrials are very interested in our nuclear progress. And they first started showing up a year or so after we dropped the nuclear bomb, the first one set one off in Alamogordo. And I have a feeling that they may have been behind the early peace talks. Eisenhower went to one in July in Geneva called Geneva I in July of 1955. And Red China was there, Russia was there. And by the way, the Russians were changing governments, and you know, they were pretty shaky at that time. Stalin's appointee at the time was Malenkov, had been replaced because he didn't make the 5-year plan, which was one of many. And they were getting ready to replace him with Brezhnev, by the way, who was kind of a crony of Khrushchev. So we were having a Russian government change. At the same time, they were having the Red Chinese shelling Taiwan, and the president goes hunting.
Those people took an oath not to reveal that the president was there and what they had seen.
okay, thank you.
This is why when Bill was in a conversation in Dr. Reiner's office, he said the president and the lieutenant colonel corrected him, commander-in-chief. They weren't allowed to use the word president. But in any case, they didn't want to use that word, although they had to acknowledge he was there. Everybody knew it. Everybody at the base knew he was coming, including all the civilians. There's 8,000 or 9,000 people there, about 4,500 enlisted people and officers. And a complete air wing is there also. They all knew he was coming. But with their communications in those days, there was no way that they communicate that back to Thomasville, Georgia, and they really didn't care. So all he had to do was make sure he came in and out of Thomasville in secret, because he had 30 international press.
The military has never been able to stop these UFOs. And if you can't protect the country, what you're doing, because that's your job, how often will you tell the people the truth? The Germans and the Japanese both lied to their people when they could not stop the Allies from bombing them. We are no different than they are.
My name is Henry McElroy, Jr., a retiring former state representative from New Hampshire. Thank you for your attention to this brief message concerning the world's interaction with both Earth-based and off-world astronauts. The reason I am making this announcement is in the hopes of encouraging better perspective to all who explore the universe. Therefore, as a result, making a more valuable contribution to humanity for the benefit of all faiths, all races, and all nations. Another reason I am here today is because I believe in the foundational wisdom of our nation, which was laid down by our founding fathers, and because we know that highly advanced knowledge and information can assist human beings in solving various problems, both in current times and in our future. When I was in the New Hampshire State Legislature, I served on the State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. It was apparently important that as a representative of the sovereign people who had elected me to this honorable office, that I be updated on a large number of topics related to the affairs of our people and our nation. As I understood it, some of those ongoing topics had been examined and categorized as federal, state, local development, and security matters. These documents related to various topics, some of which spanned decades of our nation's history. One of those recurring topics is the reason I am addressing you this evening. I would like to submit to our nation my personal testimony of one document related to one of these ongoing topics, which I saw while in office serving on the State-Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. The document I saw was an official brief to President Eisenhower. To the best of my memory, this brief was pervaded with a sense of hope, and it informed President Eisenhower of the continued presence of extraterrestrial beings here in the United States of America. The brief seemed to indicate that a meeting between the President and some of these visitors could be arranged as appropriate if desired. The tone of the brief indicated to me that there was no need for concern, since these visitors were in no way causing any harm or had any intention whatsoever of causing any disruption then or in the future. While I can't verify the times or places or that any meeting or meetings occurred directly between Eisenhower and these visitors, because of his optimism in his farewell address in 1961, I personally believe that Eisenhower did indeed meet with these extraterrestrial off-world astronauts. I hope my personal testimony will aid the nation in its quest for continued enlightenment. I am honored to follow in the footsteps of those who have come forward with their personal testimonies, those who deserve the admiration of the American people for sharing their accounts publicly in an effort to elevate our knowledge to a higher understanding of our existence. I would also like to thank the countries of France, Brazil, Britain, Russia, Italy, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, New Zealand, and our neighbor to the north, Canada, Uruguay, and Australia, for also opening their files to the citizens of their countries and allowing them access to information that is so very important to the evolution of humanity. I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to have a small part in doing the same by sharing the information I have given you today. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank our communications crew for helping us make this happen today, and I'd also like to authorize distribution of this video for anyone who wants to use it for educational purposes. And thank you.